Behold, what manner of love the Eternal has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the children of God. Now we are the children of God, and it does not yet appear what we shall be. But everyone who has this hope is free. Everyone that has this hope in themselves is free. For we know that we have passed from death unto life because we love one another. 50 years ago yesterday, a Sunday, a comparable in-gathering Sunday like today, I preached my first sermon here, titled, "Of Stuffed Owls and the Teachings of Jesus." You see, Barbara and I were married in a Methodist church. And visiting with the minister prior to the service, he counseled us, knowing that I was going into the ministry, that in our first parish, if the church had a parsonage, which most Methodist churches did, and furnished ones at that when we moved in, we should be careful not to move anything. He said, if there is a stuffed owl on the mantelpiece, don't even look at it. Because very soon the oldest and wealthiest member of the congregation will be knocking on the door to come to call, and will look at that owl on the mantelpiece. And if you have moved it, if you have touched it, if you have even looked at it, in a matter of hours, it will be known throughout the congregation that you have come to change things. And your life will be miserable. I don't have to spell out to you what this might have to do with the teachings of Jesus. God knows you know what trouble he got into. I need not have had any qualms about this church, of course. Quite the contrary. If anything, this congregation was way ahead of me. It had just been waiting for me to get here so that it could get on with some of the changes it had in mind. It should be said that from the very beginning, this congregation was gathered with people who, according to one of our venerable predecessors, were not in the least part in revolt against the Apostles' Creed. Some of you here today, I'm sure, don't have the clue what that is. I will only tell you that there is not a word in it about the teachings of Jesus. Not a word about feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, letting the oppressed go free. Not a word about the poor, the homeless, the tempest-tossed. Not a word. It has only to do with one saving one's own miserable soul. And changing anything? Not on your life. As a matter of fact, don't touch a thing, don't so much as look at it, don't move it, or your lives will be miserable. But I don't have to bring the changes on that gospel for you either, do I? Suffice it to say that when we first arrived here, 39 years after its first ingathering, this congregation had already changed a host of things in this town, not the least of them, the way to do church. All souls. Get it? all souls. The Apostles' Creed, or any other creed for that matter, had nothing to do with it. Nor who you are or where you came from, regardless of race, creed, color, national origin, sex, anything. And that meant souls and sinners, believers and non-believers. And an awful lot of people didn't have any idea at all about what to do in church. Though most of all it meant people who were, for whatever reason, to greater or lesser degree inclined to not to accept things as they are, but rather to envision things as they ought to be. So this congregation, this church, first one thing and another led a charge. Planned Parenthood was conceived and organized in the minister's living room of this congregation. That was in a time and a place when such matters were hardly mentionable. Family and children's service, when often as not, indeed more often than not, public sentiment held that the poor are poor because they're lazy. The people make their own beds and should be content to lie in them. The Urban League numbered among its earliest supporters members of this congregation. Not that the ministers of the church were always preaching to the choir, because there wasn't even a choir. As I said, saints and sinners. If I get another chance, I'll tell you about that sometime. Even now, to say that by the time we got here, seeds had already been sown in abundance. This people had grown into a spiritual force in this community, a force to be reckoned with. One of my colleagues said, "It's the conscience of Tulsa. That's who you are." No longer could prejudice be preached in the guise of principle, or could ignorance be paraded as piety, or would kindness be killed in the name of virtue, not in this town, not with all hell breaking loose from this pulpit. Separate but equal. Nonsense. Genesis over geology. Oh, for crying out loud. Personal salvation before care and concern for those who really need us. Blasphemy. Now and again did we err on the side of understanding? Were we foolish in the name of freedom? Have we been known to make too much of reason? Of course, we're not God. We're the children of God. And it does not yet appear what we shall be. 1 John the Epistle, chapter 3. But we are not done yet, not by a long shot. We have stood our ground. We have often as not been known to stand alone. Often we have led the way, given shelter and strength to those who knew in their hearts what they should be doing and what should be done, but were loath to do it. We were there in the struggle for civil liberties, the right for women to choose, and to support and to succor those who seek freely to love and care for one another, and those who were made outcast because of who they are or what they believe. Not without fault. Not without fault, and not always with a full heart. But look out these windows. Look out these windows. Behold, we have planted a garden in the wilderness. Yes, there are, and there always will be some who insist, but what about your faith? Where's your faith? How about faith enough to move mountains?